6 weeks. That's how long it took to turn the thinnest, ugliest patch in my backyard into turf thick enough that my neighbor stopped me at the mailbox to ask what I did different. No aerator, no tilling, no topsoil. Just overseeding done the lazy way. At the right time, with the right seed rate. And down here in Texas, timing is the whole battle. Most folks seed at the wrong soil temperature, and the whole effort dies before it starts. I'll walk you through this in 5 steps. The full plan, no fluff. And stay with me, because at the end I'll share the watering schedule for the first 10 days that makes or breaks every overseeding job. And it's the opposite of what most people do. Here's the thing. That backyard patch sits under my 2 pecan trees. Deep shade most of the afternoon. And it had thinned out to maybe 40% coverage. Mostly bare dirt and a few sad strands of Bermuda hanging on. I overseeded it with turf-type tall fescue, and I had germination showing in 7 to 14 days. By week 6, it had filled into near full, thick turf, the kind you want to walk on barefoot. No aerator, no tilling, no topsoil. That's it. Most homeowners get this wrong because they treat overseeding like throwing seed on dirt, and then watering it like it's an established lawn. Wrong temperature, wrong seed rate, wrong watering. The seed never stood a chance, and they blame the seed. I'm going to walk you through this in 5 steps. The full plan, no fluff. Step 1, you time it by soil temperature. And down here in Texas, that's the whole battle. Step 2, you prep the patch without any tilling or aeration. Step 3, you pick the right seed and put it down at the right rate. Step 4, a lazy little top dress that holds moisture. And Step 5, the starter fertilizer that drives roots instead of weak top growth. And stay with me, because at the end, I'll share the watering schedule for the first 10 days. That's the part that makes or breaks every overseeding job. And it's the exact opposite of what most people do. Get those 10 days wrong, and everything you did in the first 5 steps dies before you ever see it. Get them right, and your neighbor's going to wonder what you're doing different. Let's walk through it together. Step 1. You time it by soil temperature. And down here in Texas, this is where the whole job is won or lost. Forget the calendar. Forget what your neighbor did last weekend. The number that matters is 65 degrees, measured at 4 inches deep, and falling. Cooling off, not warming up. That falling part is critical. In DFW, that window lands late September through mid-October. I push my soil thermometer down 4 inches in the shade under the pecans, take a reading in the early morning, and I wait until I see that 65 mark on the way down. Trust me on this one. A cheap soil thermometer costs about $10, and it's the most important tool in this entire process. Here's the failure mode. Seed too early, while that soil is still sitting at 90 plus in the September heat, and you cook the seedlings before they ever stand up. I learned about timing and conditions the hard way back on my very first Texas lawn in 1993. Sprayed on a windy afternoon, burned half the grass, and the lesson stuck for 30 years. Conditions are everything. The other failure is going too late. You need at least 6 weeks of growing weather before our first frost hits around mid-November, or those young roots never harden off. Hit that 65 and falling mark, though, and you'll see germination in 7 to 14 days. That's your first win, and it's a reliable one. Step 2. You prep the patch, and you do it without any tilling, any aeration, or any topsoil. This is the lazy part, and it works better than the hard way. Here's the thing. A fescue seed needs to touch actual dirt to germinate. If it lands on a mat of dead thatch, it hangs up in there, dries out, and dies. So drop your mower to its lowest setting and scalp that thin patch right down to an inch, inch and a half. Bag the clippings. Don't mulch them back down. You want them gone. Then take a hard steel rake and work the patch aggressively until you're pulling out the dead brown thatch, and you can see bare soil between the standing grass. That's the whole goal. Seed to soil contact. Most homeowners skip this and just throw seed over the top of a half-inch thatch layer, and then they wonder why nothing came up. If you leave more than about a half-inch of thatch sitting over that ground, your seed never reaches dirt, and the job's dead before it started. When you can run your hand across that patch and feel grit instead of fluff, you're done. The soil's exposed, it's ready, and you didn't rent a single piece of equipment to get there. Step 3. Now you pick the right seed and you put it down at the right rate. And the rate is where most folks go wrong in both directions. For a shaded backyard like mine, under 2 big pecan trees, you want turf-type tall fescue. Not the old pasture-type fescue. Not a contractor's mix loaded with annual rye filler. Read the label. You're looking for turf-type tall fescue because it handles shade and our Texas heat better than just about anything else you can overseed into thin Bermuda. Here's the math, and this is the part to write down. For overseeding, thickening up turf that already exists, you put down 4 to 6 pounds per 1,000 square feet. That's it. For a brand new lawn from bare dirt, you double that to 8 to 10 pounds. But you are not starting from scratch. You're filling in. More is not better here. I want to be straight with you. When you dump double the seed, thinking you'll get double the lawn, those seedlings come up so crowded they choke each other out. They get tall and spindly and weak. And worst of all, that dense wet canopy invites damping off fungus that can wipe out a whole patch in a couple of days. Underseed, on the other hand, and you get a thin, patchy result that didn't justify the effort. So measure your patch, weigh out your seed, and stay in that 4 to 6 pound lane. Then spread it smart. Put half the seed down walking one direction across the patch. Then turn 90 degrees and put the other half down walking perpendicular. A little handheld broadcast spreader works fine for a patch this size. Or you can do it by hand if you've got the feel for it. That cross pattern is the trick that gives you even coverage with no thin streaks and no piled up clumps. When you stand back and that bare soil has a light, even peppering of seed across the whole patch, not a pile here and a gap there, you've done it right. Step 4. The lazy top dress. Here's where most folks reach for a bag of topsoil, and here's where I'm going to tell you to put it back on the shelf. You don't need it. After you've spread your seed, take the back of a leaf rake and lightly drag it across the patch. Just enough to settle the seed into contact with the soil. Not enough to bury it. Then cover the whole thing with a thin layer of finished compost. No more than a 1/4 inch. That's it. Picture the thickness of 2 stacked quarters. That's your target. Now, why compost and not topsoil? Topsoil is heavy, it's inconsistent, and half the bags at the big box store are full of weed seed you're about to germinate right alongside your fescue. Finished compost is light. It holds moisture like a sponge, and it feeds the soil biology that's about to wake up under your seed. That 1/4 inch does one job and does it well. It keeps the seed zone from drying out between waterings without smothering the seed. And that depth matters more than you'd think. Turf-type tall fescue needs light to germinate, and it needs to be shallow. Bury that seed under an inch of soil, because you got heavy-handed with the top dress. And it'll never push through. It'll rot down there in the dark. I've seen homeowners dump a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch of material over the top thinking they're protecting the seed, and what they're actually doing is signing its death warrant. The seed cooks its energy reserves trying to reach light it'll never see. Stay at a 1/4 inch. When you look down and you can still see little flecks of seed peeking through that thin blanket of compost, you've got it exactly right. That's the look you want. Not buried, not exposed, just tucked in. The small win here is that you've now built a moisture blanket over your seed without a single bag of topsoil, without a tiller, without breaking your back. The patch is set up to germinate, and it costs you a wheelbarrow of compost. Step 5. The starter fertilizer. This is the last thing you do before the watering phase takes over. And it's the step that drives everything underground that you can't see. You want a phosphorus-rich starter fertilizer. Look at the three numbers on the bag, the NPK ratio, and you want something in the neighborhood of 18-24-12. That middle number is phosphorus, and phosphorus is what builds roots. A germinating seed doesn't need a lot of leafy top growth yet. It needs to throw roots down fast so it can anchor and start feeding itself. Apply it at the label rate. Read the label. I say that in every video, and I'll say it again here, because the rate on a starter fertilizer is calibrated for new seed, and going heavier doesn't help. It burns. Here's the mistake that trips people up. They walk out to the garage, grab whatever lawn fertilizer they've got sitting on the shelf, and dump it on. Usually that's a high nitrogen summer feed, something like a 2904. That first number's way up high, and all that nitrogen pushes weak, spindly top growth before the seedling has any roots to support it. You end up with pale, leggy grass that flops over and gives up the first hot afternoon. Wrong fertilizer, wrong result. And then there's the one that quietly kills the whole job. Pre-emergent. If your fertilizer is a weed and feed, or anything with a pre-emergent herbicide mixed in, protiamine, dithiopyr, anything in that family, do not put it down. A pre-emergent works by stopping seeds from germinating. It cannot tell the difference between a crabgrass seed and your brand new fescue seed. It stops them both. Cold. You'll water for 2 weeks, see nothing come up, and never understand why. No pre-emergent within 60 days of seeding. None. Read the bag and make sure the only thing in it is fertilizer. I learned a version of this the hard way back on the very first lawn I ever tackled in Texas in 1993. Different product, same lesson. Conditions and timing decide everything. I sprayed a generic broadleaf killer on a windy afternoon and burned half the grass right alongside the weeds. The neighbor across the street wandered over and told me to spray more often. I did, and with the wrong product, and made it worse. 30 years later, the lesson hasn't changed. It's not about how much you put down. It's about putting the right thing down at the right moment. Get your starter right and skip the pre-emergent, and you'll feel the difference in 2 weeks when those seedlings come up dark green and standing up straight, with roots already gripping the soil. That's strong establishment heading into the part that makes or breaks the whole thing, the watering. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. If what I'm showing you today is clicking, if you're starting to realize that a thin lawn and a weedy lawn are the same problem, then you're ready for the bigger picture. A thick lawn is a fortress. Overseeding a thin patch isn't just cosmetic. It's the front line of weed prevention, because dense turf crowds weeds out before they ever get a foothold. That's the whole reframe in Chapter 1 of my book, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. Weeds aren't a chemical problem. They're a density and soil problem. If you're exhausted by the cycle of spraying every spring and watching the weeds come right back, this is the permanent fix. Not another tip, the full system. It's $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point the camera at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll wait right here. If you're on your phone or laptop, the link's in the description. All right, let's keep going. Now I want to walk you through the 3 mistakes that sink overseeding jobs, because if you avoid these 3, you're already ahead of most of the block. Mistake number 1. Seeding by the calendar instead of the soil thermometer. I see it every year. Somebody circles a date in early September because that's when they did it last year, and they throw seed down while the soil's still sitting at 90 degrees. That heat cooks the seedlings the moment they sprout. Wrong. The calendar lies. The soil thermometer doesn't. Wait until you read 65 degrees at 4 inches and falling, and the temperature does the work for you. Mistake number 2. Dumping double the seed because more has to be better. It doesn't. Overcrowded seedlings fight each other for light and water. They come up thin and spindly. And worst of all, you create the damp, packed conditions that damping off fungus loves. That fungus can erase a whole patch in 2 or 3 days. I've watched it happen on a customer's lawn. Looked great Monday, gone by Thursday. Stay in that 4 to 6 pounds per 1,000 square feet lane, and your seedlings get the room and the airflow they need. Mistake number 3. Throwing down a weed and feed or a pre-emergent right before or after you seed. I touched on this already, but it's worth its own warning because it's the one that fails invisibly. The same pre-emergent that stops crabgrass from sprouting stops your fescue from sprouting too. You water faithfully for 2 weeks, nothing comes up, and you assume the seed was bad. The seed was fine. The chemistry killed it. No pre-emergent within 60 days of seeding on either end. Avoid those 3, and the only thing left between you and thick turf is water. And that's exactly what I promised you at the start. I told you at the start that the watering schedule for the first 10 days makes or breaks every overseeding job. And it's the opposite of what most people do. Here's the thing. Days 1 through 10, you water light and frequent. 3 to 4 times a day, 5 to 10 minutes a session, just enough to keep the top 1/4 inch of soil moist. That top 1/4 inch can never dry out in daylight, not once. Now that runs against everything you've heard about lawn watering, and you'd be right to notice that. On an established lawn, the rule is deep and infrequent. Soak it down 6 inches twice a week to drive the roots deep. That's correct for grass that already has roots. A germinating seed has no roots. None. The top 1/4 inch of soil is its entire world. So when you water deep and infrequent on fresh seed, that seed zone goes bone dry between cycles. And one dry afternoon in Texas, heat will kill a seedling that already cracked open. Done. That's the mistake that quietly ends most overseeding jobs. Then you taper. Days 11 through 21. Drop to once a day and water a little deeper as those baby roots reach down. By week 4, you move to 2 deep soakings a week, same as the rest of the lawn. That taper is what trains the roots downward instead of leaving them shallow and weak. Light and frequent early, deep and infrequent later. Trust me on this one. That exact schedule is what carried my thin backyard patch under the pecan trees from 40% coverage to thick turf in 6 weeks. I didn't aerate. I didn't till. I didn't haul in a single bag of topsoil. I watered the way a seed needs, not the way a lawn needs, and the seed did the rest. Before I let you go, here's the last piece. Overseeding fills a patch in 1 season. Keeping it thick across fall, winter, and the next seeding window is what keeps weeds out for good, because a thick lawn is a fortress, and there's no bare ground for weeds to claim. That's the whole back half of my book, Larry's 30-day weed kill protocol. Chapter 9 lays out the year-round, season-by-season maintenance calendar that turns a one-time patch into a permanent fix, not another weekend of work. 88 pages, no fluff. Just the protocol, start to finish, for $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. I'll be right here. And if you're on your phone or laptop, the link is right down in the description. All right, here's the takeaway. Seed turf type tall fescue at 4 to 6 pounds per 1,000 square feet when your soil hits 65 degrees. And falling, top dress a 1/4 inch of compost, then water light and frequent for the first 10 days. And a thin, ugly patch fills into thick turf in 6 weeks flat. This is the same system management thinking I bring to every lawn I touch. Know the variables. Hit the timing. Let the grass do the work. Next, go watch my video on fall fertilizing and winterizing new turf, because that tender young fescue needs the right feeding to survive its first DFW freeze in mid-November. Go check the soil temperature in your backyard. You'll see what I mean. I'll see you in the next one.